It's not often that your home nation sells where you live to another country, and by extension, you with it. But this is what happened to the Creoles living in French Louisiana when it was sold to the United States in 1803. Suddenly going from being a French subject to living in America must have been pretty odd, which raises the question, how exactly did the Creoles react to the Louisiana Purchase? Before we begin, it's necessary to discuss the word Creole. Nowadays it has a racial connotation to it, but it's important to note that this wasn't the case until the mid-1880s. And as of the Louisiana Purchase, Creole just meant francophone person born in the New World, and so that's what we'll use here. So, when Jefferson purchased Louisiana from Napoleon, it was, to put it mildly, sparsely populated. The non-Native American population there was about 60,000 people. Over half of these people were slaves, and of the rest, the major groups were French, Spanish, German and Irish settlers. Now, whilst Louisiana was sold by France, it had only belonged to France for about 2 years at this point, and totally in secret. They had gotten it from Spain, who in turn had won it from France in the 7 Years' War 40 years prior. And Napoleon had been negotiating the sale before he'd even sent a governor there to, run the place. As such, you can see that the people there weren't exactly attached to the idea of French sovereignty, since the only difference was that for about a year there had been French troops in the region instead of Spanish ones, and then all of a sudden those left and it was American troops in their place. And even when it was under Spanish control, it was done with a light touch. And so any changes in leadership had little effect on those living there, especially those in rural areas. So how did the people feel about all of this? Well, the response was mixed. You see, the United States didn't make this land a state, but a territory. This meant those who lived there got the negatives of government, like taxes, but with none of the positives, like democracy or citizenship. Instead, they got the potential future maybe promise of one day prospectively becoming citizens. Perhaps. For most of New Orleans and St. Louis's populations, they were furious. And many took to the streets to protest their sale and, more importantly, their being forced to become Americans. Now, with these changes also came opportunities, particularly with respect to the Mississippi River and trade. The US government wanted the river to become central to continental travel and commerce. And so its leaders pledged to make it more navigable and also rid it of its piracy problem. And so locals in New Orleans knew that their city would likely become a major trade hub, which it did. However, this opportunity brought many American settlers to the city, and they had no interest whatsoever in mixing with the Creoles already there. As for the rural settlers of Louisiana, they weren't so keen. For them, their accession to the United States could only mean one thing: new all-American neighbours, which meant more competition and, importantly, worse relations with Native Americans, whom under Spanish and French rule had largely been left alone. And if they were provoked by these new owners, it could lead to retaliation, which wouldn't be directed at those in Washington, but those living on the frontier. Irrespective of what they thought, the deal was already done, and the Louisiana Territory would forever be incorporated into the United States. I hope you enjoyed this episode and thank you for watching, with a special thanks to my patrons: James Bisonet, Mr. Wolf, Kelly Moneymaker, Sky Chappelle, Rob D. Martin, Captain Psydog, Marvin Cassow, Mo, Aaron the White, Adam Stolter, Jordan Longley, Boogly Woogly, Gustav Swan, Jerry Lambdin, Rashid Ali, Gareth Turner, Maggie Patskowski, Copper Tone, Winston Kaywood, Spinning Three Plates, Corsho Wolf, Marcus Arsner, Spencer Lightfoot, Matthew Shipley, The McWhopper, Alex Schwinn, Lil Brepp and TC, Robert Wetzel, Anthony Beckett, Charles I and Scottish Trekkie.